It was a big church for its day. It could seat around 1,100, I'm guessing. Could be more, could be less, because I'm guessing. Or as I like to say, I'm remembering from a different point of view. Please don't ask me what that means, because I just made it up. The Berean Baptist Church on 11th Street in Houston was our life. Literally. We were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night for prayer meeting. If there was a revival, we were in our pews. There was no greater show in town. We had no internet. There were only 3 channels on the television. The competition was slim, but down at the church, the Spirit was moving. I'm so thankful I had parents that brought me to this place called church. Our church, the Berean Baptist Church, that was founded, I believe, by H. Frank Fort. He was a kind man, and he died in the pulpit one Sunday while he was preaching in 1963. By the time I was born, June 24th, 1958, they had a new building sitting right next to the old sanctuary where Dad would spank me when I'd gone too far. Did you ever go too far? I spent most of my childhood trying to figure out how far is too far. And where was the line? Somebody show me the line. I was always looking for it. I never did find that line that would let me know when I'd gone too far, but I knew from experience that crossing it would earn me a trip to the old sanctuary for a spanking. But my biggest worry was that, God forbid, we might not go far enough. What would that be like? I never intended to find out. Mama was a stay-at-home mom, the church pianist, and sang alto. My older brother Mike was good-looking, athletic, and played the guitar. Daddy was a lawyer, tone-deaf and short, so he became a deacon. Missy, my little sister, would make her arrival in 1967, and she was an angel. And I am Mark Lowry, and I loved choir practice. Oh, no, I wasn't in the choir. I was too young for that. But I'd tag along with Mama and play with the other kids, exploring the church while our parents rehearsed the songs for Sunday's service. After the adults were finished with the choir practice, we'd all meet in the fellowship hall. The best part of choir practice was the fellowship afterwards in the fellowship hall. There were donuts. Duke and Carlene Westover sang in the choir and grew up with my mom and dad at the Berean Baptist Church. Duke and Carlene fell in love, got married around the same time as my parents. In fact, all of their friends married around the same time in the 50s and started having babies together. Well, not together, but at the same time. In fact, Duke and Carlene were at the hospital the day I was born. My brother Mike and Kim Westover were born just days apart. Kim is Duke and Carlene's only child. When she was born, the nurse took her to the waiting room to meet her father. She laid Kim in Duke's arms. He was so proud. What a beautiful little girl. He examined her closely to see if she was all there. When he flipped her over, he noticed a gaping hole at the base of her spine. He asked the nurse, "What's this?" The nurse immediately wrapped Kim up in a blanket. She rushed her into surgery where doctors fused her spine. She had spina bifida. She would be paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of her life. But to me, she was just Kim, another kid at church, but she had a great set of wheels. She also had leg braces that would allow her to walk with crutches, and best of all, to stand. She took such pride in standing with the rest of the congregation to sing the Sunday hymns. But the floor to our church was slick. It wasn't carpet. It was tile, very slippery, and it sloped down at an angle toward the pulpit. At least one Sunday a month, Kim would lose her footing, and while still holding on to the pew in front of her, she'd slide under it. We'd drag her up and keep singing. The center aisle of our church started high at the back of the auditorium, sloping down to a table that stood in front of the pulpit with "This do in remembrance of me" engraved on the front. Sometimes during choir practice, I'd get on the back of Kim's wheelchair and we'd fly down that aisle, crashing into the bottom of the Lord's Supper table. Oh, what fun we had! The Berean Baptist Church was an independent fundamental Baptist church. But unlike other brands of Baptists, including other fundamental Baptists, we used real wine when we served the Lord's Supper. Mogan David. And we had the Lord's Supper every Sunday night, not once a month like most Baptists. At our church, the wine was always served in little tiny glasses that looked like thimbles. Deacons would walk to the front of the church, stand around the table, and then the pastor would hand each deacon 2 trays, one tray of wine and thimbles, or as Uncle Bubba always said, tiny shot glasses, and a tray of itty-bitty crackers. I don't know why they called it the Lord's Supper. It was more like a snack. The deacons would slowly walk up every aisle while passing the trays down each pew where you'd pick your own. The first tray would be the wine. The next would be the itty-bitty crackers the size of Tic Tacs. There were many times when that plate of crackers passed in front of me, I was so hungry I was tempted. Yes, tempted right there in church to grab a handful of them, dig the cheese whiz out of Mama's purse, and have supper. If I were in charge, nobody would leave hungry. I think calling it a supper is false advertisement, but that's just me. We independent Baptists didn't like Southern Baptists much either. They were too liberal. Worst of all, they had a cooperative program. I'd hear preachers and evangelists come through our church and rail against those liberal Southern Baptists and their cooperative program. They never really told us what was so bad about cooperating, but we could tell by their tone and their volume it must be awful. Our music director, Brother Jack Thompson, was a little man. He had a crooked middle finger on his right hand and was always waving it around. Years before, he was working on some cabinets and couldn't tell if the blade was still spinning on the table saw, so he stuck his hand under the table where the blade poked through to find out if it was still spinning. What he found out was how stupid he was and what it feels like to lose a middle finger. A clean cut right through the second knuckle. When they sewed it back together, when they sewed it back on, it was permanently bent. They couldn't sew it back on straight because every time he made a fist, he'd be shooting the finger. And back in the 60s, song leaders didn't do that unless someone cut them off in traffic. You know, when it was necessary. So they stuck it back on at an angle. He can make a fist, but he could never again let Houston drivers know exactly how he felt. And just because you can't show it doesn't mean you don't feel it. He felt it a lot. He was an angry little man. It happened every Sunday night. I'd wait for the climactic moment. The choir would be singing, and Brother Jack would want them to sing louder, really raise the roof. He'd be jumping up and down, waving both hands in the air, every finger extended except the middle one on his right hand. It just flopped around like a limp Vienna sausage. But he didn't need it. Our church choir was full of singers, real singers, flat-footed, give it all you got, independent Baptist church singers. And Aunt Joelle Murphy was one of the best. She wasn't really my aunt, but back then everybody called everybody else's mamas and daddies aunt and uncle. It's a Texas thing. The only soprano we had for many years was Zoella Herndon. That name I did not make up. She was married to Brother Harold Herndon, one of our deacons. She had bright red hair, a shade not found in nature, and wore it up in a big, round Texas bouffant. Zoella was a good soprano singer, and every Baptist choir better have one. She was responsible for the high notes at the end of Because He Lives or the Hallelujah chorus, which made everybody shiver and tend to throw things. Quote, they threw babies from the balcony tonight, close quote, my papa often said. As Zoella aged, so did her high notes. They began to lower and warble, much like an old truck trying to start. Come to find out, vibrato is a harsh mistress. At a certain age, at a certain age in every singer's life, your vibrato will betray you, and you're the last to know. Seriously, everybody knows before you do. Somebody should tell you, but they never do. Oh, how our church loved to sing. It was joyful, but we took it very seriously. We did not want to sing something that was not theologically correct. We were Bereans, and we would wrestle with the words of every song before it made it to the Sunday service. They all had to pass through our scriptural grid, and we changed a lot of them. We changed several of Bill Gaither's lyrics. One was called I've Been to Calvary. Bill wrote the second verse, and part of it he said, I knelt and prayed, Jesus, hear my plea. We changed it to, I realize Jesus died for me. You see, our church didn't think you could pray until you believed. How can you pray to someone if you don't believe he's there? My pastor often hollered. It says somewhere in the Bible that God doesn't hear the prayers of those who don't belong to him. So how can he hear a sinner's prayer? Huh? Did you ever think of that, Bill Gaither? Probably not. And that's a good thing. Because that hair splitter is one of the bags I've dropped along the way. As you age, you take a closer inventory of what you're willing to carry. And some bags are just too heavy and unnecessary the older you get. But what really brought us all together was the gospel music. Yes, we love to wrestle with and debate scriptures, but more than that, we love to sing. You could feel God when our church sang. Old timers would say, the glory came down. Thankfully, we never changed the words to the old songs. You got to give us credit for that. We sang them like they wrote them. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Or blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. We praise thee, O God, for the Son of thy love, for Jesus who died and is now gone above. But before the sermon, we had special music. Aunt Joelle would step to the microphone and sing, little is much when God is in it. Or John Enlow would sing, talk about a child that do love Jesus. Here's one. Here's one. I was little, but I wanted to be one too. I wanted to be a child that do love Jesus. I started singing at the Berean Baptist Church when I was 4. I had been singing in my big voice, as Mom and Dad called it, when I was home. But whenever I would sing in front of anybody who wasn't in my immediate family, I would revert back to the timid, shy, pitifully weak voice of a 4-year-old. I was asked to sing in church one Sunday, and Daddy said he would give me $5 if I would sing in my big voice. Well, no one, never one to turn down an easy 5 spot. I let him know it was a deal. The following Sunday, I walked to the platform, stood on a chair beside the pulpit, and belted out, the windows of heaven are open, the blessings are falling tonight. There's joy, joy. I can't sing that high. I used my big voice, and boy, did it pay off. After that, my 4-year-old voice was reserved for non-paying customers. I found out that if you sang real loud, little old ladies would fill your pockets with nickels and dimes after church. Mama said she would turn my pants upside down and coins would fall to the floor. It was years later that I actually had my own encounter with Jesus. But I'm thankful I was raised by parents and grew up in a community that loved Jesus. They got a lot of things right and a few things wrong. But the one thing they got right that I am most thankful for is they got his name right. I am so thankful they told me about Jesus.